Now we will hear a Dharma message from Reverend Gyaji.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. And thank you for all the people who are tuning into the Zoom as well. Uh, oh, I'm sorry. Did I say Happy New Year? I meant to say Happy Mother's Day. My mind is in very different places right now. Happy Mother's Day. Oh, man. Brain slip there. I certainly hope that we've all gotten a nice breakfast at least. I know I need to have more to eat. We begin today. I'd like to ask everyone here, a kind of a weird question, which is, how many of you remember being in your mother's womb? How many of you have remember being in your mother's womb? Probably no one, right? Probably no one in here has remembered being in their mother's womb, right? What it's like to be inside that cramped little space, right? But it kind of goes to show you, how much goes on behind the scenes in order for us to be able to just enter this world, right? Just to be in this world, it took a lot to get us here. A commonly given story in Shin Buddhism, in this relationship between Amida Buddha and myself, is the example that is given about the mother and the child, and more specifically, I might have mentioned this story before, but I always like to mention this story because it's very telling, and it depicts very well what Amida Buddha does for us, what the world of absolute truth does for us. And it is the story of the navel, or heso, in what we say in Japanese, or belly button, in using the common colloquial term, the belly button, right? The navel. Did you know that the navel served a crucially important role in your upbringing, right? And that's very true. And that it's not just a piece of decoration in our stomach here, but it actually served a function, right, before we were even born, right? And it is through the umbilical cord that our mother gave us the proper nutrients to be able to grow from a fetus to a baby, right? So we slowly grow and grow until it's time for our birth into this world. So the umbilical cord is not only connected us physically to our mothers, but it nurtured us with love and support, even though we did not recognize that it was there at the time. We just lived our lives, right? And not growing up, not knowing about this support. But we kept growing and growing until it came time to be born. It is also a seamless process from the perspective of the baby, from our perspective, right? But really, our mother constantly worked hard for us to be born, right? She worried about us. Our mother worried about, what would be the proper nutrients that she needed to take in. I remember my sister, when she was pregnant with her first baby, she even went so far as not to drink any caffeine, and she didn't eat any sashimi or sushi or maguro because of the mercury that's in there. So she took all these extra care for herself, right, for her baby, right. And so our mother constantly worried about the different harms that might come our way. On our end, we have no idea the immense amount of work that it took for our birth to be possible. We have no idea how much of a struggle and the amount of suffering that was necessary just for us to be here right now, right? And in the three treasures, as was just read, hard is it to be born into human life, now we are living it. Hard is it to be born into human life, now we are living it. So this is referring to our past karmic conditions, but in this example, we can really tell, it is really difficult for us just to be born and enter this world. It is my mother's wish, our mother's wish, that to be born happily, and I'm constantly being raised and nurtured by this love and support. And in much the same way, Amida Buddha is like our mother, right? Amida Buddha works to bring us to be born in the Pure Land. We have no idea how much work it took in order for this to be possible. On our side, it seems seamless, right? Amida Buddha wishes that we are born in the Pure Land, the world of infinite life. And the Buddha says to us, I promise you that you will be born in the Pure Land as a Buddha, just like myself. You will be a Buddha with infinite life in the Pure Land. So how does the Buddha do this then? The Buddha gives us the proper nutrients that nurtures us and brings us to awaken to the world of the Pure Land. And these nutrients we collectively call onenbutsu. Okay? And our mother takes in the nutrients, works hard to sustain us, and worries and cares about us. And Amida Buddha, in much the same way, provides us with the Nembutsu, has worked hard to ensure that we have a path to be born in the Pure Land. And there is nothing other than to entrust ourselves to our mother's working, Amida Buddha's working, that will bring us to the Pure Land. So Amida Buddha gives us the nutrients we need to be born in the Pure Land, and the nutrients we call the Nembutsu, right? And so then we say, we respond with Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, Amida Buddha. I will not doubt and be that I'm being supported. I will try not to disparage the Buddha and the world of infinite compassion. Namo Amida Butsu. That's what Namo Amida Butsu means, okay? And so, again, let me point out, though, that the Buddha is not a deity, okay? The Buddha is not a god. We are not praying to a god, okay? It is truth itself, right? But truth itself is so abstract that, how do we understand this truth? So the truth emerges in the form of Buddha, in the form of the scroll of the Buddha, right? In order for us to understand what it means to be embraced in the world of truth. Right? So I might talk as if the Buddha is a person, right, or a mother-like figure, but it is the world of absolute truth that embraces us, okay? So please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, even though I express it in that way, okay? So I'd like to share with you a story that my father once told me, and it's a story that he once read, and he was really moved by it, so he wanted to tell that story to me, so he told me that story a long time ago. But it was a story about a teenaged son, seinen otokonoko, who lived in the countryside of Japan, so the inaka of Japan, right? And this boy, this teenager, enters college. Okay, so he's accepted to a college, and so he's moving away to Tokyo, to the big city, away from the countryside, to be able to go to college and become what do you call it? Ichininmai, right? This person, right? Who would future be like this a person on his own. And so, but his family wasn't rich, very impoverished, and they lived in the countryside, right? And so he lived in poverty for much of his life. But this son studied very hard and got into college, and so he was on his way to move to Tokyo to start his new life as a college student. But so at this time, this is maybe the early 1900s of Japan, and so there is no Shinkansen yet, right? So there is no bullet train, and it takes a long time to get to Tokyo on this train. So on this long trek, he is given this bento by his mom, right? By his mom, because it'll be a long ride to get to Tokyo, right? So his mother prepared for him an obento. And as it turns out, right, the time came for lunchtime, right, for everybody to eat. And so, but he doesn't want to eat yet, right? He doesn't want to eat. But then slowly, as the time drags on, the people around him start to pull out their obento, and they start eating, right, and talking with each other, and they're laughing. And then so he looks at their obento, and then it looks like these nice onigiri, nice food, right, and it looks very delicious, right, and so his stomach starts to get really hungry, right. Right, so he's getting very hungry, and then he's starting to think about, man, I really want to eat right now. I'm hungry, right. But he didn't want to open his bento box, right, around these people, right? And as a person comes from an impoverished home, he knew that his mom could only prepare food that was really cheap, right? So ちょっと恥ずかしかった. He was very embarrassed about what would be in this obento, right? And then so he starts to think to himself, why couldn't I be rich? Why couldn't I come from a well-to-do family, right? And I really hate feeling embarrassed like this. I hate my mom. Why does she have to prepare such a cheap and oishikunai obento, right? And so these are various thoughts that he was having as he was getting hangry, right? We call it hangry. And, I get like this often too, right? You get hangry and you start to like blame people for why we're not eating right now, right? And so he was envious of the people around him, right? And thinking all these, thoughts, these negative thoughts. And so in those days, families, who were well-to-do ate with white rice, right? And the onigiri was white rice. But the cheap families, or people who were impoverished, only ate with what's called like a barley grass. It was not real gohan, right? It was kind of this cheap stuff that was like hay-like kind of things, and so very cheap things, right? So he was embarrassed about this, right? But his stomach just kept growling and growling, right? Right? And if he sits and waits there long on this long ride to Tokyo, right, he would suffer this pain. So what am I gonna do, right? And so he starts to think about this. And in Japan, we worry about what other people are thinking, because in Japan the space is very limited, especially on a train. The space is very limited, and so in Japan, you might not know this now, but you'll see when we go to Japan next year. But people are very concerned about 周りの目, right? 他の人たちがどう思ってるのかよく見てる, right? They're very concerned about how you are dressed, how you present yourself. It's not really about a matter of rich or poor, but it's a matter of just kind of tidy and kind of well kept or not. The people kind of scrutinize each other, right? So this is very, the Japanese society is very keen on this, right? And very perceptive about this, right? So back to the story, the teenager is getting hungry, and so finally he says, I can't wait any longer. I'd rather have people, scoff at me and laugh at me than to go on hungry. So then he pulls out his obento, shikatanaku, right? And he opens the lid, and what does he find? Right? What does he find? He finds this gorgeous obento, right, with all of the best foods, right? It has meat in there, has like ebi in there, right? And then he lifts the leaf that covered the onigiri, and then the onigiri had white rice, right? White rice, perfectly cooked white rice that was just cooked, dekitate no onigiri, right? And so he was so happy to see this, right? This mouth-watering obento and this delicious meal. And so he was so happy, and then he was crying that while he was eating this, right? As he recalls his mother's love for him, right? So can you imagine this story, right? It's kind of hard for us to imagine this nowadays, because nowadays, we eat meat at every meal, right? Gohan or white rice is like atarimae, right? We could have that every meal, every day, with no qualms about it. We wouldn't think anything of it, right? This abundance of food and living in peace is kind of course, that's the way it is for us in the way we think, right? We have so much food, it's hard to be grateful of the things that we have. Do we say itadakimasu or gochitosama at every meal? Honestly, I don't, right? I tell my son that I do that, but I don't, right? And honestly, right? But maybe there will come a day, because of, climate change and all these things, right? That we won't have, that food will become scarce, and maybe we will come to understand, what this teenage boy felt when he saw white rice and meat in his obento, right? But anyway, he leaves his home to go to Tokyo, and eating the best obento of his life, recalling of his mother's love for him, and how his mother wanted only the best things for him. She wanted him to be happy, right? But was unable to give him the finer things in life all throughout his life. But not today. Today, her son deserves the best. Today, her son gets what she always wanted to get him. Right? Today, she gives him everything she can muster up, because he is worth it. Right? And to his mom, he will always be the boy that needed her care. And she shows her love for him through this delicious obento. What a touching story, right, about a mother and her child. We are also, though, given an obento, right? The obento is the onenbutsu. Okay, it is the food that nourishes our spiritual selves. But the thing is, we don't think the obento is much, right? We think the obento is not really delicious looking, right? It's covered under some leaves, and we think we know what it is, but we really don't. And when we see the people around us, We feel like, we're the odd ones out, right? We're the odd ones because our customs, our beliefs, our traditions are different and they don't match up to the way the rest of society perceives the world. So we become hazukashi, embarrassed, right? We grow overly concerned about other people's eyes, right? And we even get mad at the onenbutsu, thinking, what use is this to me, right? Why do I have to be in this tradition that doesn't provide anything for me, right? Why should I say the onenbutsu? I don't win the lottery. It doesn't provide me with any kind of wealth or any kind of things like good health or these kinds of things, right? What has the nembutsu done for me lately, right? As Janet Jackson would say, right? So we turn our backs on this teaching, right? We doubt this teaching's truth. We may even think this religion to be a bunch of baloney, right? And not really speaking to us in our everyday lives. And it's very easy to fall into this trap, into thinking in this way. But in the story, the teenager assumed he was getting this cheap onigiri, this cheap rice, right? Barley rice. But he assumed that he knew what his mom prepared for him. And likewise, we assume we know what the onenbutsu is. We think it's just, mo arigataiっていうことでしょ。はいはい、生仏, right? We think we know what it is, right? And we assume that we know what it is, right? But if we rely on the onenbutsu, right? Open ourselves up to this teaching and be honest with this teaching and reflect on our lives through this teaching, we will see that we were always and now being guided by the Buddha Dharma. We start to see that there is much more to this life than just this egocentric self. We start to view and perceive the others around us, ourselves, and this world in a much different way, right? And that's what the Buddha Dharma provides for us. But it takes time for this to happen, right? Like the college student who it took all the way for him to get to college to come to this obento, right? To recognize his mother's love for him. It takes many of us until adulthood, until we recognize the significance of the umbilical cord, the significance of what our mothers do for us, right? It takes a long time for us to recognize our connection with absolute truth and how we are being embraced and nurtured by absolute truth. It takes time, but that's why we come to the otera, the temple. That is the significance of coming to this temple. And as we read in the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we here together are on the Nembutsu path together, okay? And with that, I would like to end today's Dharma message. Happy Mother's Day. And as we recall our mother's love for us, let us also recall the love or the compassion of our spiritual mother, Amida Buddha, as well. Thank you. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Sensei. Please stand and join in singing the Gatha Arigato. It's on page 249. If you're on Zoom, it'll be on your screen.
Mi hotoke no
Please be seated. When sentient beings think on Amida, just as a child thinks of its mother, they indeed see the Tathagata, who is never distant, both in the present and in the future. These are words by Shinran Shonin. Namo Amida Butsu.